Welcome to Diplomatic Encounters. My name is Gideon Hanumansing. Quite recently, Prime Minister Kamla Bissessar was the guest of the government and people of Canada during an official visit extended her by Prime Minister Stephen Harper when they first met in 2012 during the 6th Summit of the Americas in Cartagena, Colombia. Though relatively short, the visit would be productive, with both sides recommitting to deepening half a century of diplomatic relations and strengthening in practical ways the ties that have existed between the two countries since the middle of the 18th century. Perhaps the most visible public welcome for Prime Minister Kamla Bissessar as she undertakes an official visit to Canada, half a century after the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Guest of the Canadian government, the morning would begin at Rideau House with a courtesy call on Governor-General David Johnston and Mrs. Johnston, who would exchange pleasantries about their own visit to Trinidad and Tobago in 2012, and would later pleasantly surprise the Prime Minister. That's the extent of it, Your Excellency.
Well, that's just a warm-up.
The symbols of nationalism proudly fluttering in the Canadian wind as Prime Minister Stephen Harper greets his Commonwealth and Trinbagonian counterpart, Kamla Bissessar, on Parliament Hill in Ottawa with full military honors. It's when the sound of the gun becomes a friendly gesture from one leader to another. When the powerful vibration of the cannon tells its own story of diplomatic cordiality and conviviality between two peoples, sharing the same hemispheric space and practicing strong democratic principles and human values. This is the start of another eventful day in the life of Prime Minister Kamla Bissessar. In the Confederation Hall, she will be greeted by presiding officers and high officials of the Parliament, and will then retire to Prime Minister Harper's office for a private tete-a-tete discussing the close and long-standing relationship, hemispheric matters, and international affairs. As the morning progressed, the agenda will include a walk down the colorful Hall of Honor, after which both leaders would witness the signing of memoranda of understanding to develop projects in defense and security in Trinidad and Tobago, and a second that will assist Trinidad and Tobago build regional military capacity. An agreement was signed to assist with the natural disaster management plan, particularly hurricanes. Cooperation in education also formed part of the MOUs, engaging Brock University in St. Catharines and the University of Trinidad and Tobago. The historic Thursday morning in Ottawa would end with a joint statement between the two heads of government.
Madame la Première Ministre, bienvenue, Prime Minister. On behalf of the Government of Canada and all Canadians, it's my great pleasure to welcome you here. We last met at the Summit of the Americas a year ago, and I'm delighted to see you again. Votre visite nous rappelle que nos deux pays entretiennent des relations diplomatiques amicales depuis plus de 50 ans. Indeed, Canada was one of the first countries to recognize Trinidad and Tobago after it gained independence from Great Britain in 1962. In that regard, we appreciate the warm hospitality that was shown to His Excellency the Governor General David Johnston during his state visit last year when he joined you for your country's 50th anniversary celebrations.
First, let me thank you, Honourable Prime Minister, and your government and the people of Canada for your very gracious hospitality, the warm welcome we've had here, and indeed some Caribbean sunshine this morning. We thank you very much for that after the rains yesterday.
Later that evening in Toronto, at a joint reception, both Prime Ministers shared with a distinguished group of business people from both countries histories and accomplishments in a celebration of the strength and depth of the relationship between Canada and Trinidad and Tobago, with the entree coming from Kenneth Frankel.
Madam Prime Minister, welcome to our Canadian Kalaloo. In Canada, we call it our cultural mosaic, but the concept is the same. Our countries share a basic belief that our strength comes from the diversity of our people and our ability to meld their contributions. To paraphrase David Rudder, the great calypsonian who has lived in Canada for a decade, from Tobago to Toronto, all o we is Kalaloo. Our countries enjoy deep social, political, and economic ties. The Canadian-Caribbean partnership with Trinidad and Tobago as a key partner is unique in the Americas. It is founded on centuries of close commercial and cultural relations. Canada has been enriched by the energy and vitality of over 100,000 Trinbagonians. Canadian investment in Trinidad and Tobago has reached $1.36 billion, and bilateral trade alone last year was almost $600 million. But beyond the statistics, both of our countries have made outsized and unique contributions in the worlds of academia, literature, music, and sports. Canadians study Trinidadian historians. We celebrate its world-renowned authors. And as sun-starved Canadian snowbirds can only do, we dance with abandon to the carnival rhythms.
Prime Minister Harper was a little more circumspect, though at times entertaining as he engaged the audience.
This is a city that has been mentioned is now home to thousands tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands who trace their roots throughout the Caribbean region and to Trinidad and Tobago. In particular, all of those tens and hundreds of thousands of people who have come here to escape the harshness of the Caribbean winter. I keep trying to find an explanation. And today, Prime Minister, I think you would agree that we moved our friendship forward, building on the discussions we had last year when we met in Colombia at the Summit of the Americas. Our government has made deeper engagement with our neighbors in the hemisphere a priority, as has already been mentioned tonight. And I want to thank your government, and in particular, you, Prime Minister, for being such a willing and able partner as we continue down that path. Advancing trade between Canada and the Caribbean community is a goal both our countries share. In fact, as has been mentioned, we've been trading partners for a very long time, since the days of sail, when ships headed south from our East Coast ports filled with salt cod and returned with cargoes of sugar, molasses, and rum. Today, Trinidad and Tobago is one of our largest trading partners within the Caribbean community. We measure Canadian investment in Trinidad and Tobago in the billions of dollars. It's actually one of our largest investment donations, investment that target countries anywhere. And our annual two-way trade is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And I know there are many business people here this evening who are working hard to increase those numbers. So at this moment, I would like to share some encouraging news. Earlier today, our two governments took steps that will lead to increased cooperation, economic development, and an even stronger relationship. For instance, Canada will share expertise on public-private partnerships with Trinidad and Tobago, and in fact with the wider CARICOM community. As well, earlier today we witnessed the signing of memoranda of understanding that provides for cooperation on national security and also to formalize an important military training program between our two countries. We've also moved forward on post-secondary education. Thousands of students from Trinidad and Tobago have come to Canada to obtain university degrees. And today, an agreement was signed between Brock University and the University of Trinidad and Tobago will expand cooperation between them in many useful areas of endeavor. So we hope that even more of your young people will come to study in Canada. Here they will join more than, I don't know, I've been given many figures, anywhere from 60 to 100,000 other people who have roots in the islands. Ladies and gentlemen, these arrangements not only make our country stronger, they deepen a friendship that I believe is truly a model for the hemisphere. In fact, I would go further. I think this relationship is really a model for the world.
In response, Prime Minister Kamla Bissessar opened on an historical path, tracing the linkages from trade in cod and rum to investments in education and ecumenism.
Now, as you may be aware, this official visit to Canada is the first by a Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago since the founding father of our nation, Dr. Eric Williams, Trinidad's first Prime Minister, visited Canada in July 1966. And so it's almost 50 years. He was then received by your Prime Minister, the Honourable Lester B. Pearson. And indeed, I'm sure we will all say much has changed for both our countries in the intervening years. What has remained constant, however, is a very dynamic and productive relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and Canada.
Recalling the historical antecedents of the early Canadian presence in Trinidad and Tobago, she said the relationship grew more personal in the late 19th century, when Presbyterian minister Reverend Dr. John Morton arrived in Trinidad from Nova Scotia in 1868 with his family to set up the Canadian mission.
Reverend Morton and the Canadian Presbyterian missionaries, they worked tirelessly, more so in the rural communities and in the Indo-Trini communities. And their work, Dr. Morton, his colleagues, they founded schools alongside churches, providing a Western education for children who had been deprived of opportunities to attend school because of the status of their parents as indentured laborers. And so many of us in Trinidad say thanks to the Presbyterian Church, which began its mission in Irie Village in Princess Town, and later established high schools and teacher training colleges where our citizens were able to achieve upward mobility much quicker than if the Canadians had not lent a helping hand. Today, I say the profound impact of the Presbyterian schools continue to resonate in the country today, as many of them are among the top performing schools in Trinidad and Tobago, the Presbyterian schools. I was very privileged to be a student of one of those schools, the Irie High School in my own district in Superior. And I'm certain that amongst this very esteemed gathering, there will be many nationals of our country now resident in Canada who attained some or all of their early schooling at the Presbyterian school back in Trinidad. So we want to say thank you from way back when. I've always said that education is a key out of poverty. Education is the passport to a better life. And so Canada has helped us in that regard as well. Independence for us in 1962 brought official diplomatic relations between our two countries, and the rest, as they say, is now history.
Further engaging the audience, the Prime Minister explained the way forward and shared with them the economic strategy for Trinidad and Tobago.
We are very cognizant of today's very competitive global business environment. We are very cognizant of the need to extend our reach beyond what may be termed our traditional trading partners. However, as we know only too well, long-held and well-nurtured friendships are worth their weight in gold and are not easily broken. And therefore, Prime Minister, even as we acknowledge the changing patterns in world trade and investment flows, as we look to embrace the new emerging markets of the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and indeed the wider Latin American region, we will also commit and consolidate our long-standing relationships with our traditional partners, such as your country here in Canada. As you may agree, trade and investment have the potential not only to increase economic security, but also to strengthen the relationship between nations. As a government, we see ourselves as the facilitator of business and the creator of opportunities in the business sector, rather than as a competitor with the private sector. We are, however, quite open to public-private sector partnerships, what is known as the P3 model. And so, as we move steadily towards our goal of improving the quality of life and ensuring sustained prosperity for all our citizens, our approach is to see those who knock at our doors as very valued customers. We know that the knock is potential, which we must convert into investments. In fact, may I say that the entire approach of my government is one that is customer-centered and service-driven.
She said the government of Trinidad and Tobago is committed to fostering sustainable growth through trade and investment.
For decades, our oil and gas sector created and sustained our wealth. But you well know, we cannot continue to depend on finite, volatile resources. And may I say, we give the example of the mango tree will continue bearing fruit, but these resources are finite. They are not infinite. And therefore, we have to look ahead. We have to think innovatively and act very decisively. Diversification is the key to our continued economic growth. And so it is for this reason that my government has identified several priority sectors for development and investment. And I share these with you as we invite you to partner with us. We're looking into the area of information communications technology, light manufacturing, clean technology, which includes renewable and alternative energy, maritime industries, logistics, the creative industries in fashion, film, animation, music, and carnival arts, tourism. And we're looking at different areas of tourism, not your regular sun, sea, and sand, but we're looking into education tourism as well in the health sector and health tourism, education tourism. Agribusinesses, financial services, these are some of the areas that we intend to go into for diversification. In Trinidad and Tobago, you will find a legal environment which protects the interests of investors while also securing the interests of Trinidad and Tobago. And Prime Minister, as we discussed it and you shared with us, there is so much that we have in common, one of it being in the area of our jurisprudence on the principles of the rule of law. And so we strive for a win-win result. We value good corporate social responsibility, and we reward it by our commitment to long-term relationships. If you had not previously considered Trinidad and Tobago as an investment option, respectfully today I say I urge you to look again. And if you're already doing business in Trinidad and Tobago, I invite you to increase your involvement in a very dynamic economy. A world of opportunity awaits you on the shores of a very beautiful twin island republic.
Her visit to Canada was also fully endorsed by Jamaican-born Canadian Senator the Reverend Don Meredith of Ontario.
Her coming here to Canada signals the bilateral relations that we have with Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the strong ties that Canada seems to foster with countries in the Caribbean. It's critical that we continue to dialogue and see how we can expand, whether it be in the IT sector, agricultural sector, oil, which again Trinidad and Tobago is known for with respect to its natural resources. So there's those linkages that I believe that will only further strengthen our bilateral relations.
The Canadian High Commissioner to Port of Spain sees the official visit in the context of a partnership between equals, notwithstanding geographical size and density of populations.
The fact that she sees Canada not as an aid provider, but as a partner. This is the new relationship between Trinidad and Tobago. A relationship based on partnership, on equality, on dialogue. So what we are going to build, work on, and the outcome of the mission and the deliverable is based on this partnership.
The excitement of the Prime Minister's Canadian sojourn echoed in different ways at other places, like the High Commission in Ottawa, where she intermingled with the crowds, opened a permanent exhibition of things Trinidad and Tobago, and launched a commemorative book that chronicles the lives of Trinidadians in Canada.
This labor of love, produced to commemorate both Trinidad and Tobago's 50th anniversary of independence and the 50 years of diplomatic relations with Canada, highlights not only the diplomatic journey, but as well the contributions of over 200 nationals of Trinidad and Tobago who have made Canada their new home and who have made a mark on Canadian society. High Commissioner Boxo tells me that the production of this book brought many sleepless nights and countless memories, which undoubtedly he may share with you in his conversations with you. In the end, we have a keepsake that forever chronicles the first 50 years of the bond between Trinidad and Tobago and Canada, and many people in their many capacities, various capacities, who have shaped this relationship over the past 50 years.
For High Commissioner Philip Boxo, it was a proud and fulfilling moment that the visit comes as both nations march towards another 50 years of diplomatic relations.
We have inspired and motivated our diaspora with our commemorative book, and we have empowered these distinguished diaspora to be our soldiers and ambassadors that will continue to promote Trinidad and Tobago and inspire our next generation here in Canada. With the launching of our new exhibition room, and by our trade delegation in Toronto, with Canada's commitment to support the upcoming Caribbean Investment Forum in June, we have renewed economic interest in Trinidad and Tobago.
Similarly, at the consulate in Toronto, a warm reception for the visiting Prime Minister. Traditional welcome with tassa, national flags personally displayed, and hundreds of anxious and excited Trinidadians happy to serenade.
During our 50th independence anniversary, for the first time in its history, the consulate celebrated Spiritual Shouters Baptist Liberation Day, Indian Arrival Day, Eid, Emancipation Day, and Diwali. And we closed off the year with a parang evening. Our nationals were invited to these festivities and expressed immense pleasure as they participated. In other words, Prime Minister, what happens at home also happens here in terms of our festivals.
Geography may separate us, but that very emotional connection that we have and that you have to the land of your birth, I do believe will always transcend, overcome time and distance. And so, thank you very much for welcoming me.
Welcome back live at noon. I'm joined by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Kamla Persad Bissessar.
While in Toronto, she would also engage the media, starting with a one-on-one interview on CP24's Live at Noon.
So why are we here? I gave you that little anecdote because it really points to the ties we've had, trading ties way back from the 18th century. Indeed, up to today, some of the products that Canada exported to us, salted codfish, remains one of the delicacies of Trinidad and Tobago, still coming out of Canada, of course. So in the early days, trading in those basic
and there
products.
was a big shipping industry between,
yes, there was.
Between your country and Canada and the East Coast.
That is very true. And thereafter, of course, the cultural ties. I believe I'm being advised almost 100,000 persons of Trinidad and Tobago origin are in fact in Canada. So we do have a diaspora here, and well, diplomatic, friendly, and cultural ties.
Later, she would field questions from the Globe and Mail that would gain back-to-back prominence in the widely read newspaper, acknowledged by Canadians as a formidable achievement for a visiting head of government. And, as if by compulsion and deep personal motivation, the Prime Minister would end her visit at the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, an institution that partners with the Children's Life Fund of Trinidad and Tobago in bridging the health needs of those requiring life-saving medical care.
The motto of Trinidad and Tobago is together we aspire, together we achieve. Prime Minister, if I may be a little bold, I would suggest that it is also a fitting motto for the relationship between our two countries, one that has been built on a strong foundation of trust, shared values, and a deep and lasting mutual respect. And all of that has a tremendous future. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
From our interactions and discussions during this visit, I easily envisage and envision another 50 years of diplomatic relations between Trinidad and Tobago and Canada. As members of the Commonwealth nations, as members of the OAS, as members of the UN, we remain largely united by a commonality of purpose and philosophy. We value the benefits which engagement with Canada has brought to Trinidad and Tobago. We look forward to the many eras of cooperation between our two countries. And so I say, once again, we extend our sincere thanks to the Right Honourable Mr. Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada, for his official invitation to Canada, and to the people of Canada for their hospitality whilst we were here.
This is Gideon Hanemansing in Port of Spain. Thank you for watching.